I want to welcome everybody to our next installment in our Safe Harbor trainings here. We want to thank DHS and OEO for their funding for these Safe Harbor trainings. Got a lot of them up on the StreetWorks website. I hope some of you have checked those out. But again, thank you for coming. Our next training is going to be on April 19th at our Eustis location. We do not yet have a topic for that, but we will be having that training on that day, so set it aside in your calendars. I want to make sure that everybody who's here signed in when they came in. If you weren't on the list as previously signed up, make sure that you go in and put your email in so that we can send you updates about what's going on with our trainings. Also, we are videotaping this training to put up on the website. So I need to go around with a microphone. If you have a question, raise your hand and give me a second to come over to you so we can get your question on the video. So that way we're not just hearing the answers. And I want to introduce Susan Keplinger. Yes. All right. Director of Catalyst Initiative at the George Family Foundation.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Suzanne. By way of introduction, he said don't get in front of the thing. And here I am breaking the rules already. Sorry, I'll get it. How many of you were at Paula Schaefer's training on trauma-informed care? A few of you. Okay, so some of what she started to go into around trauma and healing from trauma might be a repeat for you, but it never hurts to have a refresher. But I'm also going to do a lot deeper dive. So by way of a little bit more introduction, my previous job, and it's in the handouts there, I was the executive director of the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center for a little over 10 years. And in 2009, we published the first research in the country to analyze the scope of sex trafficking of any demographic group, and that was the Shattered Hearts report that we did. That process was pivotal for me and for us as an organization in terms of recognizing how trauma is stuff that we carry into our jobs with us, and how it gets exacerbated, it gets triggered, it gets re-amplified when we're doing really hard work every single day. So we started having young children who had been trafficked into prostitution coming in and telling my team, mostly Native women with their own trauma histories, really bad stories every day. So I started watching my beautiful, brilliant staff getting triggered in ways I had not seen before. So I was looking for a thing. What is the thing that I can do to help my team be more resilient, to manage some of this additional trauma? Because all of them, I would say almost all of them, came to the work because of their own trauma histories, historic trauma in the Native community, trauma that it was inflicted on them through various ways, right? But they came to the work because of their passion, of their commitment to the community, giving back to the community. But now they're getting triggered. So how do I help? I met a guy named Dr. Jim Gordon. He's the Harvard-trained psychiatrist from the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C. And he's developed a model of mind-body healing practices that it's really a compilation of ancient indigenous wisdom from around the world. And he had been doing a lot of work in Haiti, in Syrian refugee camps, post-Katrina, and he started to do some work out on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And I said, hey, Jim, you got any Indian people doing that training? And he said, no. So we got a grant from the George Family Foundation, who is now my employer. And two elders from the Resource Center and I went to the Center for Mind-Body Medicine's training in 2013. And after the first day of training, both of those elders came to me and said, this is what Indian people need to heal from historic trauma. We want to become trainers. So I always do what my elders tell me to do. And so to this day, Linda and Donna are the only Native people in the country who are certified trainers through the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C. That was the beginning of a process, and I was starting to do my own work, recognizing my own stuff, how it was impacting my leadership skills, and doing my own healing work. When the George Family Foundation, which has a long history of building integrative health and healing in systems, started to ask the question, what does this look like in community? And so I was offered the chance to lead this initiative. And the Catalyst Initiative is a 3-year initiative. We're going into our last year, although I see a future, building health and healing in community. And early on in our conversations, when I would ask people, what does this mean to you? What does mind-body medicine mean to you? What does integrative health and healing mean to you? Who are your healers? What are the practices that have meaning in your community? And a significant number of people said to me, I can't even go there. I got stuff going on. So it became really clear really early that trauma was a barrier for people to access any sense of health or well-being. And the more we started to learn about it, the more we understand that it's not just about health and well-being. It's about academic achievement. It's about all kinds of interpersonal relationship issues. It's about organizational health. So the work that we've been doing has been very potent and very powerful, and I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end in terms of resources that I can provide in terms of training for mind-body skills, healing practices, and happy to answer any of those questions at the end. So, learning objectives for the day. I'm going to spend most of the front part of this time talking at you, but I'm going to try and move through that very quickly because I actually want to do some experiential work with you today and actually bring some training and teachings that you can practice to your comfort level in the room. I'm not calling on any of these people in the front because they said, we'll sit in the front if you don't call on us. Like, okay. All right. So, you guys do hard work. You are also in a sector that is constructed to make it a little bit harder, right? So the various ways that the systems are set up, government funding streams are so reliant on who's in office. Oh, well, the legislature's not funding that this year, so that grant's going away. The funders, I'm part of that now. The funders, well, we did that for 2 years and we didn't see the outcomes we wanted, so we're going to do this now. And what's happening right now with this political environment is also a moment in time that we're paying close attention to because the hateful rhetoric that is being driven by some elected officials, choosing my words carefully, is actually creating lots of trauma and lots of fear and lots of stress in community. And funders are starting to rethink how they should prioritize their funding. So a lot of funders are going, well, should we be funding more civic engagement work and less of this stuff? And so there's a conversation going on about what those shifts look like. And there are those of us who are saying, don't go changing too much, add money, but don't start, oh, we're tired of this, we're going to do this now. So just know that I understand this sector is very difficult with all the demands on your time, do more with less, not enough staff to do heavy caseloads, all of that stuff. So what do you do about that? You can beat your head against the wall, as many of us have done. And a quick story. I'm a survivor of sexual violence and domestic violence. And when I was in therapy for the domestic violence, I was trying to get out. I couldn't get out. And my therapist, after I got out safely and after all was said and done, I had coffee with her once and she said, you know, remember that day when you were in my office and I got up and I took a piece of whiteboard and I drew a big target on it and I said, if you want to beat your head against the wall, do it here. Because that's what I was doing. That's what we do. We beat ourselves up. We continually do this. But that's not exactly the best thing that we could do. So vicarious trauma, I was told there was a real interest in what is vicarious trauma, secondary trauma. There's lots of different terms around trauma. There's personal trauma, individual trauma, stuff that happens to us. I got raped, that was a trauma. I got beat, that was a trauma. There's car accidents, there's illness, there's the loss of a loved one. There's lots of personal traumas that we can endure. There's collective trauma, which is now something that people are beginning to recognize, that whole communities experience trauma. There's historic trauma, multi-generational trauma. We understand now about epigenetics. We actually carry these genes with us. What happened to my grandparents is actually a part of who I am. And if we're not aware of it, it can show up in very weird ways. And then there's this vicarious trauma, secondary trauma. And you're going to hear more about how that physiological response actually takes place in your body. But when you are exposed to trauma every single day, you start to absorb it. It starts to affect you. It can show up in very weird ways. Now, one of the things that we did at the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center early on was we wanted to understand how historic trauma was showing up in the workplace. Because it's not something that people really notice or pay attention to. And I would say the two biggest ways it would show up were in conflict avoidance and passive-aggressive behavior. So, okay, if we begin to recognize where it's showing up, then we can start to do something about it. But until you're aware, you can't do much about it. So a lot of what I want to talk about today is simple awareness. It's awareness. If you are exposed to secondary trauma repeatedly, it starts to accumulate. So an individual trauma, it's the individual's response. A traumatic experience can influence people in many different ways. There's a guy named Bessel van der Kolk who's, actually I recommend reading his book. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. But he talks about, he's a psychiatrist and he's really doing a lot of work with trauma. He talks about working with a Canadian couple who were in a car accident, a bad car accident. And the man and the woman were both in the same accident. But when they did brain scans, the man's brain scans were just lit up. I mean, his brain was just on fire all the time. He was hypervigilant, he was shaky, he was reacting. The woman's brain scans were flat. She had gone inside. She had withdrawn. So they had the same car accident, but they had entirely different responses. So it's an individual response. Some people are more resilient. Some people have different coping skills. Some people, this is an accumulation. So I mention that just because your reaction is your reaction. It's valid, right? When people say you shouldn't feel that way, you feel the way you feel. Yeah. So it's very important that people who are in helping professions and caregiving professions begin to understand how you are modeling caring for yourself to the folks that you're working with. Because if I'm sitting across the desk from you and I haven't slept for 3 days and I'm anxious and I'm ramped up, I mean, you guys working with young people, they see you. Also pay attention to the adverse childhood experiences stuff. You all know about ACEs, right? That was a really important study, although when we first saw it, we went, yeah, duh. We knew this. Oh, now we have a study to validate it. So now we have a study to validate it. But it's also important to pay attention to adverse childhood experiences will impact your capacity to make decisions as an adult. So those of us who come from histories where we have had adverse things happen to us in our childhood, it's good to know that sometimes it starts to show up in how we are reacting to things, how we are interacting with people, and you'll see more about that. We all have stress, part of the deal. Stress is a normal part of our lives. Stress, when we get stressed out, our bodies produce a hormone called cortisol. It produces a number of hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, things like that. Cortisol is an immune system suppressant and an inflammatory agent in your body. So you know this from your own experience. If you are stressed out, you're going to get a cold, right? You tend to get sick. You get aches and pains. You don't want to, you get tired, you get grumpy. It is an impact on your immune system. And the other thing to know about inflammation in the system is actually part of disease, chronic disease. Diabetes is a part of an inflammatory disease. Cancer is an inflammatory disease. So a suppressed immune system and a heightened inflammation in your system is actually part of what leads to higher levels of chronic disease. So add it all up, adverse childhood experiences, high rates of stress. Unless you have really good self-care practices, you're much more likely to suffer. Cortisol. Important to understand cortisol. It is absolutely essential in our lives when it's normal. When it's not normal, when it is part of your everyday life, when your cortisol levels are jacked up every day because of extremely high stress levels all the time or much of the time, your brain starts to think, oh, this is what it should be. Your adrenal glands start to produce it at that level. It starts to reset as a normal function in your body. And so even when you don't feel particularly stressed out, your body is now producing cortisol and adrenaline at a rate that you don't need it in your system. And remember, it's an inflammatory agent and it's an immune system suppressant. And my lunch? So in the way old days, when we were just living as simple people, killing our food, living in caves, whatever, these were physiological reactions that were designed to help us live. If I'm walking through the woods and I see this guy, I am going to have a danger reaction to it. I'm going to do what is absolutely appropriate. My body is going to prepare me to either fight or run away or shut down. So if you pay attention to what animals do in the wild, they do this just naturally. They can either run really fast, or they can turn and make themselves big and fight off the threat. Or in some cases, like a rabbit, will just freeze and not be noticed and survive, live to see another day. So this is what happens in our bodies. It's a natural response. If you see a danger, you should have this response. It will help you survive. It's a survival mechanism. We actually are more prone to action. So the blood flow into our fingertips and our extremities starts to get reduced so that if we have an injury, we're not going to bleed as badly. Our adrenaline actually makes our muscles start to tense up so we are able to spring. We can run faster. So there's a whole physiological reaction that's happening when you are faced with danger. But if you think that this guy is in front of you every single day, every minute of every day, if your stress levels and your anxiety and your worry levels are so high that your body is doing this, now you are going into that zone where the toxicity in your system is going to impact you. That's what vicarious trauma is. That's what immediate trauma, that's what trauma does to us. Questions yet? By the way, you can ask questions whenever you want. Okay. So you probably know a bit about these reactions. Fight, flight, or freeze. This is our physiological reaction. It's not that you say, I think, what should I do? I'll punch the tiger. Or I think I'm going to yell at the threat. It's an instinctive reaction. It's an automatic reaction. And it comes up in different ways. Fight can be, it's the inner psychological need to stay in control. So if you feel that you need to be in control at all costs, that could be a version of your fight response. It sometimes involves anger. It sometimes involves justifying your behavior, making sure that you're right at all costs. That's a survival mechanism. You could yell. You can, there's a number of ways it shows up. You can engage in blaming and shaming, or that's when actual threatening behavior or violence takes place. Running away can also have a lot of different aspects. It's not always physically leaving, although maybe you've been known to get up and leave a room if you feel threatened, or walk away from a person, and that could be a really good move to do, right? So all of this information is simply for you to digest and start to think about. It's not for me to say what's right or what's wrong. It's information that I hope will be useful to you as you start to begin to develop more awareness about how your body and your psychological processes are reacting or responding to stress, to danger, to threats. So silence is one way of running away. I'm not talking about it. Don't talk, I'm not, no. Mm-mm. Just refusing to discuss the problem can be a flight mechanism. So I think this is it's a good list. It's a good way of keeping in mind that when someone is doing that, it could be that their stress levels are telling them that this is how I survive. Because what happens is your reptilian brain, the part of your brain that is your survival mechanism, your amygdala, is in control now, right? It is survival. It's all about what do I do to survive? And if you grow up with these toxic stresses in your life, this is how you learn to survive. You could also learn that freezing is a good way for you to survive. Like the bunny rabbit, like other animals who just shut down, it's a survival mechanism. And it's really, again, it's a physiological response because your body is starting to prepare itself for what may come. I'm not going to read these slides so you can read them. Right? So this is what all the different parts of our body that are affected by stress, by toxic stress, by trauma, by vicarious trauma. You will notice if you're getting stressed out, your mouth gets dry. You need a drink, you want some gum, you want some mints, because your saliva flow is going to decrease. Your pupils will dilate. All this stuff is happening. And we're going to talk about the breath. The lungs, how you're breathing is one of the first things that you can begin to notice. When you're stressed, when you're anxious, your breath gets very shallow and rapid. And if you think about this, you'll know this is true. The bowels, there's a huge amount of stuff that goes on in your gut that is related to your emotions, right? When you're nervous, when you're anxious, it shows up in your gut. If you've eaten a big meal and then you have something happen that's stressful or difficult, you're probably going to feel it in your gut. There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of physiological communication going on between your gut and your brain. There's something called the vagus nerve. It's a major nerve that wanders from, vagus is the wandering nerve, goes from your brain stem down into your gut. And so when you're breathing deeply, like we're going to do in a little bit, you're actually stimulating that nerve. You're stimulating that nerve to tell your brain it's okay. So when your gut is calm, your brain gets that message, we're calm. But when your gut is knotted up, you're getting that message in your head, something's wrong, something's wrong. Sometimes it is wrong and you need to pay attention to it. If you're doing outreach work and you're not listening to your gut, you could be putting yourself at risk, right? So instinct and intuition is very, very important. All of this is about awareness, the awareness of what's happening with your body. Your blood vessels, when you have the fight or flight response, again, that's a physiological response so that if you get cut, you won't bleed to death. If the tiger takes a big chunk out of you, you have less blood flow because your body has prepared itself for that. The muscles tense, so there's all this activity going on. Your heart starts to beat, you get palpitations. All right, so let's do some stuff. The body scan experience. I'm going to walk you through a few things today. I want to say first, do this to your own comfort level. If you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. Just pretend, just wait till, is she done yet? Just go through it. But those of you who want to try this, I think it's one thing for me to sit here and talk about stuff, but it's another thing for you to actually begin to experience it. So I want to do a body scan. So if you would, sit comfortably in your chairs, put both feet on the floor, and sit up straight. Sit with dignity in your chair. Make yourself comfortable. Yeah, see, I love this. People immediately start to go, oh yeah. Feel the chair supporting you. I'm going to ask you to either close your eyes, or if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, you can just lower your gaze and soften your gaze so that you're just looking down a little bit. You can look down on the floor in front of you. And just notice where your breath is. Are you breathing high into your chest? Is your breath able to come down into your belly? So if you're comfortable, put your hands on your belly, your low belly. We get lots of messages in this society about we shouldn't have bellies. Well, we have them, and so let's love them. Take a breath and actually let your belly, your lower belly, below your buckle, where your belly button is, actually expand with the breath. And notice how that feels. It may feel different if you're not accustomed to this method of breathing. It's called diaphragmatic breathing. So take a breath in through your nose and let it just drop into your low belly, and let your belly extend, and hold it for 2 minutes or 2 seconds. And then exhale through your mouth. And breathe in slowly through your nose. And exhale through your mouth. And as you feel yourself settled there in the chair, just imagine, feel what's going on with the crown of your head, the muscles around your forehead. Notice them, relax them. As you breathe slowly in through your nose and out through your mouth. What about the muscles around your eyes? The muscles around your jaw. If you're comfortable, just open your mouth a little bit. Let your jaw hang down. We carry a lot of tension in our jaw. And breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. I invite you to turn your attention to the back of your neck. And if you feel tension there, just release it a little bit. And your shoulders, Let them drop. Take a moment to look down your arms visually, just internally. Just think about your arms, your elbows, your forearms. We get a lot of tension in our forearms from keyboarding. Your wrists, your hands. Now go back to your torso. You're breathing in through your nose, deep into your belly, and exhaling through your mouth. What's your tummy doing? Your tummy okay? As you breathe into that belly, just let it relax. And your low back, how are those low back muscles? Your hips. And draw your attention down to your upper legs, your knees, calves, your ankles and your feet. You're just scanning your body to see where the tension is. How do you feel? What doesn't feel right? Just notice it. Take a couple more deep breaths. And then come back into the room. You can slowly move your wrists around or your ankles, wiggle your fingers, and come back into the room. Any observations? Did you notice anything unusual? Carrying a lot of stress?
In places you didn't expect.
In places you didn't
Paid
expect.
attention. Yeah.
Carrying stress in places you didn't expect until you started to pay attention. Anyone else?
I never noticed how tense my back is.
You never notice how tense your back is. Low back, mid back?
Like in the middle of my back.
In the middle of your back.
It's actually kind of painful if
Yeah.
I pay attention to it.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else?
I couldn't stop thinking thoughts. I just couldn't stop thinking about what else I had to do.
Couldn't stop thinking thoughts, thinking about what else she had to do. Anyone else? That's a very common challenge that we all face when we stop. Because we actually live in a society that prioritizes productivity. I remember I went to a Coalition for the Homeless conference up in Duluth a couple years ago, and they were giving an award. And they gave an award to a woman, and they said, she's on call 24/7. I said, why are we celebrating that? Shouldn't she have a day off? Right. So that very thing Heather mentioned about what's going on, our monkey minds, always thinking, we're going to come back to that. But just know that even the most experienced meditators struggle with that. And it's part of the challenge of actually calming ourselves down, is we're just not used to it. We're not taught these things, most of us, early on in life when we can start to make them our habits. But the breathing down into here, we're going to come back to this several times today because this is really important. If you notice how you feel when you breathe low and slow, as opposed to how you feel when you breathe up here, you are not in control of the situation if you're breathing up here. You are reacting. When you're breathing down here, you're in control. So we're gonna go into that a little bit. Mirror neurons. How many of you have walked into a meeting or walked into a room and noticed immediately that the mood was such and such? Either people were really crabby, or they must be talking about layoffs, or everybody's in a great mood. Why are we getting the rest of the day off? I mean, you can sense the mood in a room, right? Most of that is because we're very keen observers of other people's body language. We have to develop those skills. But there's also a physiological thing going on, and it is your neurons. These are your cells. It's cellular activity. And what we have only started to realize recently is that we actually can pick up on someone else's cellular activity. And you know this, right? If you're working with someone who's really hyped up or who is really drawn inward, you feel it, right? If you're in a room full of negative people, you start complaining. Even if you came in and you were like on top of the world, it was all of a sudden, oh, I guess everything does suck. There's a reason for it. So this is a really important observation for you to start to think about being aware of what your neurons are doing. What are you mirroring to people, and how are they perceiving you? And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was at the Indian Women's Resource Center, we're in the Phillips neighborhood, and we had two levels of housing. Every once in a while, we'd have, native mob would come around. We'd have some trouble. And there was a guy there, his name's Sal, my man Sal, who was the security and facility director, bald former Marine with tattoos on his knuckles. And sometimes Sal was the right guy to go out and deal with the problem, but sometimes I was the person to go out and deal with it. Because if Sal showed up, it was a fight. He's the guy, And if the little gray-haired woman showed up, it was a different dynamic immediately, right? So one day there's some guy, we had a child care center, the moms are coming with their babies, and there's some guy yelling up at the 4th floor, "Effing, I'm gonna kill you!" And he's like screaming, he's totally out of control, and he's swearing, and he's threatening violence, and I thought, okay, Sal's somewhere else. I gotta go talk to this. I could call the squads, but it'll take them a half an hour at least to get here unless I tell them it's shots fired. Then they'll be there, and then they'll be mad at me because there are no guns. So, all right, we're not gonna call the police. I'm just gonna go out and talk to this guy. So I go out on the street, and I go up to him, and I say, "Hi, I'm Suzanne," and I immediately drop it down. My breath is down here. My demeanor is calm. I'm not like, "What are you doing? Come on." I'm very calm. My vocal quality is very measured. And I introduce myself to him. I tell him my name, and I ask him if I can help him with anything. Is he hungry? Does he need something to eat? And he's on something. I don't know what he's on. And so he suddenly lunges at me this close to my face. And I just stood there and I said, "Do you need like a sandwich?" He said, "Who are you? Who are your people?" I told him, "First Nations Abenaki." "Oh, okay." And he calmed down immediately, and I said, "I want to give you the respect. I don't want the police. You don't want the police. But I got moms and babies here, and I'm afraid you're talking about hurting people. And can I ask you, would you leave?" And he said, "Okay," and he left. And then I went back to my office and collapsed. So I was like, whoa, that was scary. But the mirror neurons, right? That was so real and potent in that moment. That if I had acted differently, it would have been an entirely different conversation, right? So this is a really important point to begin to realize how you are actually reflecting to other people how you feel. It goes beyond just sensing there's a bad mood in the room or what are you so crabby about. There's actually a physical thing happening. And so it's important to begin to understand how this is shaping relationships. Your relationships with the folks you work with, your coworkers, and the families, the youth, whoever if you're on the streets. Your relationships are being shaped by how they understand you showing up. How do you show up? Do you show up angry? Do you show up weary? Are you showing up stressed out? They pick up on that. So what's the antidote? I believe that there are multiple ways of practicing what we call mind-body medicine. It can be ceremony, it can be cultural healing, it can be faith, there's lots of things, right? It doesn't have to be meditation. It can be, that's one thing, but there's lots of things in this whole bucket of mind-body practices. And what we're doing at the Catalyst Initiative is actually trying to unpack what are the practices that have meaning in your culture, that have meaning in your community, that would be something that you would do. It doesn't have to be going to a therapist. So this is my personal bias. We have developed a trauma-informed care system that has really helped us understand what trauma is and how we need to screen for it and how we should talk about it. So there's an intellectual thing that's happened with trauma-informed care. We have not fundamentally shifted how we're healing. We still go, oh, trauma, clinical intervention. Get you to a therapist. So maybe that is going to be okay, and maybe that's what you need. But if you don't want to go to the therapist because he doesn't speak your language, he doesn't look like you, you're afraid, you don't want to be pathologized, you don't want to be medicated, there's taboos around this stuff in your community, then you don't go. And if you're in the system and you don't go, you are now what? Non-compliant. Right? So what we're trying to understand is, where are the cultural healers in community that can be that resource? The curanderas, the Bantu healing drum, the elders, the imams. Who are the healers in community that can actually become the front line of help? And maybe that's enough to stabilize someone, then they do want to go to the therapist. Maybe they don't need to go to the therapist. But there's a missing component. So what we're trying to build into our systems are culturally grounded ways of healing from trauma that reside in community, that are supported by funders. Radical. So it can be meditation, it can be prayer. Movement, we're going to talk about movement. It can be Tai Chi, it can be Qigong, it can be walking. It can be yoga, it can be stretching. There's lots of different things, right? So I don't want to be proscriptive in terms of what this, I'm going to offer you a few different samples of things you can try. They don't work, don't do them. Find something else. Find the thing that works for you. So we did a little diaphragmatic breathing. And now I want to talk a little bit about what actually is meditation. Meditation can be what you just did. The body scan is a form of meditation. And in fact, that's actually one practice that I use if I can't sleep. If I'm not sleeping, I will do the body scan. I'll just, where am I holding tension? And usually by the time I get to my shoulders, I'm asleep. Because it actually takes your mind off of whatever you're thinking about. This thing that we do, right? I meditate most mornings. And this morning, I was reviewing my checkbook. I was thinking about this training. I was thinking about the event I have to go to tonight. But I would just keep drawing my attention back to my breath. And so out of a half-hour meditation session, I might have gotten 5 good minutes of just clear emptiness. But 5 good minutes is good. It's a practice. It's not a, I got it now. You practice, you practice, you practice. It's just like any other discipline. So let's just do a few minutes of meditation. There's mindfulness meditation. There's different ways to meditate. And again, if you're not comfortable doing this, don't do it. Just wait me out. But if you're comfortable with it, again, just sit comfortably in your chair. And we like to think about, there's a string at the top of our heads, sort of just gently lifting us up. Because when you're actually using that really good posture, you're increasing your capacity to bring oxygen into your system. And then if you just gently lower your gaze, what you're doing is you're straightening out this spinal column and you're allowing airflow. So there's a physiological thing that helps the process. So again, close your eyes if you're comfortable, or lower your gaze and soften your gaze if you don't want to close your eyes. And pay attention to the breath as it comes into your nose. Breathe in through your nose, deep into your belly, and out through your mouth. And if it helps you, you can think of words. You can inhale, thinking of the word soft, and exhale, belly, soft belly. Because that's what your body is doing, is softening your belly. And as thoughts come, let them come. But then just gently bring your attention back to your breath. in through your nose, deep into your belly, and exhale. You can, if you like, imagine a vision that is a calming vision, a cloud, a river, a single candle, a flower. Just breathe and just be. Notice how the breath enters your body and how it leaves. You can think of your torso as a balloon. The breath fills up the bottom of the balloon first, and then exhales from the top of the balloon down. You can bring your attention to the sounds around you as you breathe. Notice anything you hear, just notice. A few more deep breaths. Let your shoulders just relax. That mid-back, just relax. And when you're ready, come back to the room. You can wiggle your fingers. So I'd like to see if anyone feels different now than you did when you came in this room 45 minutes ago.
I'm sleepier.
She's sleepier. Yep, yep. I see some nodding heads. How anyone want to say anything about that observation? Microphone. Sorry.
I also noticed and became more aware of my heartbeat and how it was actually slowing.
Yeah.
Where I sometimes feel like it's always pumping, so yeah.
And actually, if you did check your heart rate before you meditate and after you meditate, many people do notice that their heart rate is actually decreased, and blood pressure. This is a really effective way of keeping blood pressure that's getting a little high, of getting it back down. My brother uses this for his blood pressure. Yeah. Anyone else? So this is a very successful practice to treat depression, anxiety, and PTSD. We did a literature review. There are copies of the summary out there, and you can get the full review on our website, wanting to know what does the data tell us about using these mind-body practices to address trauma in adults. And most of the studies were done in two populations. Sorry. Veterans and interpersonal violence survivors. And what they found consistently was that practices like meditation, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and yoga all reduced depression, anxiety, and PTSD symptoms across the board. And in some cases, actually maintained those improvements beyond the intervention. And for survivors of childhood sexual abuse, the decrease in depression scores were 65%. So this stuff does work. It works variously with some people. Some people works great and some people doesn't. It really is a practice. And were you thinking about stuff this time, Heather?
Not as much,
Okay.
because I had a visual I was focusing on.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, there are little techniques that you can use, and there are apps. I am a technological idiot, so I won't pretend to know a lot about this, but there are many apps that you can get. You can just Google meditation apps. There's one called Yoga Nidra that my friend swears by. that will actually walk you through guided imagery, meditative practice. So there's a number of different practices you can tap into and just practice it and see how you like it. Okay, keep moving. So this is what happens to your brain. These are actual brain scans. I don't know how well you can see them, but the one on your left is a brain before meditation, and the one on your right is after meditation. So there's other studies that will show that this actually increases the telomeres and increases your cognitive abilities. Mindfulness practices in schools, by the way, are shown to improve executive functioning in children across the board. So there's fewer disruptions in the classroom, test scores improve, presenteeism is better, kids aren't as anxious in class. Why aren't we doing this in schools? I don't know, but something to think about.
Suzanne?
Yes?
Yes. I have a question.
I've recently been reading more about telomeres.
Telomeres, yes.
Can you just expand that a little bit? Because I think it's fascinating.
Oh, Trudy, it's a hard question. So the question is telomeres, and I'm not a scientist, so I don't quite understand it, but they are a physical part of your DNA. Right. And actually, stress shortens them, right? So stress will actually shorten your telomeres, which actually, in some studies, shows that it will shorten your life. And I think it's connected to the incidences of chronic disease as well. So there's really a very strong health imperative to managing your stress, if for no other reason, because it may help you live longer. It may help you stay cognitively sharp longer. And there's no evidence that it harms you in any way. And by the way, medical interventions, 62% of all medical interventions have no evidence that they work. None. Right? There's a question over here. But we still do it, right? It's Western medicine, so we still do it. Now, Western medicine is great, but there are other things we can do too.
Actually, to answer Trudy's question, I am a neuroscientist
Yay,
by training.
the neuroscientist
so this is sort of my jam because I did like a project on how meditation impacts the brain.
Can we get her on camera? Because she knows way more about this than I do.
But to answer your question about telomeres, what it is every time your cells duplicate and create more of themselves, they shorten. There are caps on the end called telomeres so that when you replicate the DNA, like all the important stuff in the middle doesn't fall off. So telomeres are like junk almost on the ends. And so every time a cell replicates, they get shorter and shorter and shorter. And essentially, they find correlations between the longer your telomeres are, the longer you live, because the longer your cells keep dividing and reproducing.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question, please?
I've read some research that says that we can consciously try to keep them longer, that if we think about them and understand about them, we could actually consciously help them to be longer. Do you think that's true?
And the microphone is going back over there because I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't know if you can consciously think about it, but I know that by making certain choices, like exercise, is shown to keep your telomeres longer. Eating healthy, so a lot of just being healthy will naturally do a lot of good things for your body.
Yeah, great, excellent, thank you. Okay, so a couple of practical things that you could try as you start to think about your own self-care. There are mindfulness practices, which is nothing more than just getting comfortable. You can sit and do some breathing first if you'd like, but to just think about gratitude. Some people like to journal before they go to bed. What are 5 things I'm grateful for that happened to me today, or in the morning, or to just think, what am I grateful for? Who am I grateful for? There's actually production, and I'm going to keep looking now. I'm going to keep looking at my expert over here. Your brain will produce what they call happy hormones. Dopamine, oxytocin. There's lots of good chemicals that are starting to be produced in your brain when you experience gratitude, right? She's nodding her head, so yes. So you can try this. You can pick a day, or you could just do this at random, but some people like to have structures and schedules, so you can think about this, and you've got the handouts. I want to say something about forgiveness. This is an exercise that we did at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine training I found it extremely powerful. Now, forgiveness is a very personal thing, but sometime you may want to try this. And you can try it by, sitting comfortably, sitting quietly, getting your breath, just sitting with your breath for a few minutes. And then you may want to just think about, who do you need to forgive? Who needs to forgive you? And do you need to forgive yourself? Really important questions, right? I don't know how many of you saw in the news not too long ago, there's a young woman named Asma who was punched in the face with a beer mug for speaking Swahili. Right. So I talked with Asma recently. She works for Farhio Khalif over at Voices of East African Women, and they're one of our community partners. And, I don't know, did you see her in court where she stood up and said, "I forgive you," to that woman? Yes. "I forgive you. I hold no hate in my heart for you." I thought that was the most beautiful thing in the world. And I told her that, and she said, if I didn't forgive her, it would harm me, and it would harm my children, because I would be angry all the time. I thought that was just a powerful example. Now, forgiveness is an individual. If someone has really harmed you or your family, that may not be where you are, but it's an important thing to consider. So these are just some ideas for you to think about. Nutrition. It's true, you are what you eat. And the more science that we're starting to understand, sugar is an inflammatory agent. If you are stressed out all the time and you're consuming lots of sugar, you're really putting a lot of inflammation in your system. But then there's also this thing that happens that when we're depressed or when we're feeling low, we start to crave certain foods, right? We start to crave sugar, fat, and trans fats and carbs. So then we eat comfort food, which then gets stored in our waistline and can lead to imbalance in our blood sugars. Imbalance in our blood sugars can lead to depression. So what do we do about that? We start to pay attention to what we're putting into our body and noticing how certain foods make us feel. I mean, some people are now discovering that getting off gluten can give them more energy. I mean, I got off gluten and I lost 5 pounds. I didn't do anything else. I just gave up gluten. Now, it was hard because I really missed peanut butter toast. But then I found gluten-free bread that was actually good. And it's hard when you go out to eat. You can't go out and have pizza because there's lots of gluten there. So there are compromises that you make. But I also sometimes will eat cookies. And there's gluten in cookies. So every once in a while I'll give myself that luxury because I don't have a physical need to give it up. I just choose to not have it because I feel better. So sugar and gluten. And some people will give up like white rice, white flour. Those white foods, not good for you. So just think about, you could do an elimination diet. If you're feeling sluggish, you could try getting rid of dairy, try getting rid of gluten. You can certainly do some more research on this. I am not a nutritionist, but there's lots of evidence that what you eat actually has a really profound impact on how you feel. And there's a psychiatrist I know who works for Prairie Care who's been working with kids who are on antidepressants. And 100% of those kids can get off those antidepressants by using meditation and nutritional coaching. So, something to think about. Movement is very important, right? So you don't have to go to the gym and pump iron. There are movement practices that are meditative. So for some people, sitting in meditation is a scary place, and you don't want to go there, and you shouldn't, right? I know when we started working with the women veterans, some of those women veterans said, I can't go there, it's too scary. And so there are simple movements that are meditative in their design that can actually give you the same meditative benefit. Qigong is one of those. Tai Chi is one of yoga. And I'm going to show you a couple of very simple movements that are very meditative in practice that you can do anytime. But if you want to try something like a Qigong class or a yoga class or just walking, walking meditation can be very powerful. And try this sometime when you're walking. Do a silent walk where you're not thinking about everything. Sometimes walking and pondering through things and problem solving is really great. Sometimes try just walking and just listening. Listen to the birds, listen to the cars, listen to what's around you. Listen. Notice. We do this if we're in a potentially dangerous situation. We notice what's around us. But try it when you're in a safe walking place, when you're in a place where you don't have to worry about threats, to just notice your environment. Notice how the air feels on your skin. Notice how the pavement feels or the ground feels beneath you. That's a meditative practice. So I just encourage you to explore different ways that movement can be part of your self-care regime, because there's lots of physiological reasons why it works. They're here. So now we're going to try a few things. This is the point where I ask you to join me in standing up if you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. You can try these from your chair. But I'd really like it if you can get just a little bit of space. I'm going to quickly show you, and then I'm going to ask if you want to try it with me. So this is where the camera becomes totally useless, but you can get the back of people doing this great. So mountains, clouds, and waterfalls. So simple. You can do this. I'm going to stand right in front of the screen just like he said not to. Breaking all the rules here today. This is good. Okay, so put your feet about hip width apart. And if you're sitting, you can also do this. And by the way, be realistic about your hips. You know, women tend to, because of society's messages, we bring our feet in too close. And men sometimes have too wide of a stance. That's a story from our airport, isn't it? Hips are right over your feet. So put your feet right under your hips. And don't lock your knees, and just feel comfortable there. And now take a half a step out, so you just have a little bit of space here. Just feel where you're, you know, where everything is. Are you positioned? Are you standing up straight? How is your breath? And the mountains are just this. You're reaching up, and that's it. So you're grabbing energy from behind you, and you're inhaling, and you're exhaling. Inhale and exhale. And your eyes are on the horizon. Inhale and exhale. And this is it. This is the mountains. Let me hear you breathe. Shift your weight just a little bit if you can. Weight goes over here to the side on your outside hand. Okay, that's it. Those are the mountains. Don't sit down yet. Clouds. If you can, I know space is an issue, you can spread out a little bit. Put your feet at right angles and keep your stance basically under your hips. And what you're going to do is just imagine that there's a ball of energy, there's a cloud of energy right here in front of your belly. And you're holding it here. You might want to bend your knees just a little bit. And you inhale, and then just very slowly exhale as you move the cloud across your torso. And when you get here, there's a little pivot, and you just go back. Eyes on the horizon. Inhale, and slowly exhale. And hold that energy in your hands very gently, like it's a giant ostrich egg. If you hold it too hard, you're going to crush it. Inhale. And exhale. Okay, and if you're doing this in your office or in your home, you can move around when you do this. You can do lots, you can move around the room so that you're actually creating positive energy in your space. You're actually creating energy in your space now. And if you're keeping yourself grounded and you're breathing low and slow, you're creating good energy. So you can move around on that one. Now the last one is the waterfalls. And again, feet under hips. 1 foot forward, one step forward, doesn't matter which foot. And your hands are, again, you're going to imagine that you're grabbing energy with your palm of your hands and you're bringing it up on your inhale. And as you exhale, you just sit back. Switch. Inhale and exhale. And just sit onto your back leg just a little bit. This is a good glute exercise if you do it long enough. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Okay. You can do those anytime. You can start your day, and if you do about 10 minutes to 12 minutes of that, really focused, you will put yourself into a simple meditative state. You'll achieve the same kind of calm that you would get if you were actually sitting in meditation. But it's actually giving you something to think about so that it's not quite as scary for some people and it's not quite as difficult. Any comments about that exercise? Observations? Okay.
Question, where does that come from?
It came from my teacher. So I work with a Zen Buddhist priest named Norma Wong, who's based in Honolulu. I try to go study with her whenever I can, which isn't often. But she actually taught us that. We invited her here to do a series of what she calls 60-40 stance trainings. And actually, if I have time, I want to just do one demo of that. But she taught us that because she knows that not everyone can sit in meditation. And it's actually it's a movement meditation. And it's so, you can learn Tai Chi. It takes some time. This, you're good. Yeah. Yes.
So I don't know if everyone else has, but I've been to several of these kinds of trainings. And a lot of times, myself included, will feel really uncomfortable doing these things. Or when you're saying people with trauma can't go there, what does that mean and what do you do then?
People with trauma can't go there or being uncomfortable with them?
No, I'm saying an individual, myself included.
Yeah.
I've been really uncomfortable in some of these trainings.
Yeah.
I'm not right now, but
Okay, good.
I have been. Why is that? And then what do you do about it?
So that's a big, deep question. And I expect people to be uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable when I first learned some of these practices because it's like, what? That's silly. So we have a bias towards it, and there's still a large societal message that says it's woo-woo, and you should just tough it out. And so we've really done a good job at just teaching ourselves to, buck up, get on with it, let's get her done, we do all that stuff. And so to actually begin to say, no, wait, I need to take care of myself, it feels wrong for some people to do it. So the entry point for people who are surviving trauma or are recovering from, there's a lot of different entry points. And so I think the best thing is to offer very simple entry points and then allow people to come to it in their own pace into the thing that they feel most comfortable with. And so what I found is that when a menu of option is presented, because when I first went to the mind-body medicine training, there was some stuff that I was like, I am never doing that. There's no way, that's stupid. And there was other practices that they would teach us that I thought, I don't know, I might try that again. And there's other stuff, I just loved it. But I chose. And other people had different reactions. So just really exposing yourself to lots of different practices and then finding the thing that really feels right. And so this is why I'm trying to just touch on a few things today, is to just not say I have the answer, but there's lots of information out there and there's lots of resources out there. So restorative sleep, very important. How many of you feel that you get enough sleep every night? 1, 2, 3 people, 4 people, a handful of people. Sleep is very important. There are some studies that show that inadequate sleep over time will produce short-term memory loss. It makes you crabby. So here's the studies. it can increase your heart rate, it can lead to depression, it can lead to weight gain. So how do we actually get ourselves into a place where we can actually fall into a really restorative sleep? And it is really to prepare yourself for sleep, to approach your sleep as you approach your day. And that means turning off electronics. There are studies that show that the blue light from electronics, whether it's your iPad or your iPhone or your TV or your computer, actually interrupts your circadian rhythms. And so if you're on devices until, oh, lights out, or if you leave your phone on by your bed, you're actually disrupting your sleep pattern. So if you can stop watching that an hour before, that's great. Might be a habit you have to break. Yes?
Yeah.
Microphone.
Yep. I don't know whether it's a good habit, and I need your advice. I find it very difficult to go to bed when I don't listen to gospel music, and I don't only use my phone. So it has been for years.
I think you should listen to gospel music in any way that, I think...
No, you talk about turning up electronic appliances, and I just like those soft gospel music, and sometimes there are consequences because in the morning your phone is up, play whole night, and before day it's off. So I don't know whether and I find it sometimes when I wake up I want to recover because it's like I'm between day and sleep. I'm in bed, but at the same time, listening, so that kind of confusion has been for years. So when I saw this, I thought whether I was harming myself because sometimes in the morning I'm depressed. I don't feel like I have slept,
So thank you. I think I wasn't clear. I would never suggest that you not listen to music at any time. It's the visuals. It's the blue light of the screen. If you're working on something, if you're watching TV, that's what can help or may be disruptive to your sleep. Listening to music or working on projects, before you go to bed, no problem, but whatever the practice is that helps you sleep is what you should try. So, yeah. I can't watch TV and then go to bed. Otherwise, I'm thinking about what I just watched. But if I read for a half an hour before I go to sleep, I fall right asleep. If I stretch a little bit, if I have a cup of chamomile tea, if you drink alcohol, actually alcohol will interrupt your sleep. It may knock you out faster, but then do you wake up? Because you're dehydrated, right? It actually is going to interrupt your sleep. So the thing that works for you is what you should do. That's always what I think. But do think about how are you preparing for your sleep, and how much sleep you're getting is an important component of how resilient you are. So I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to breeze through some of this stuff. What gets in your way? Triggers. I know that Paula talked about triggers, and some of you were there and some of you weren't, but triggers are highly emotional reactions to things. They are usually grounded in our past. It's our limbic system. It's that reptile brain. It's if the abuse always was preceded by somebody putting their hand on your shoulder, if the coworker comes up and puts their hand on your shoulder to get your attention and you freak out, that may be a trigger for you. So road rage is triggers for me. Triggers are part of traumatic experiences. It's really important to begin to understand when they're showing up, to notice them. If they become an automatic part of your day, you have no control, right? So begin to think about how do you develop a discipline to recognize where your triggers are showing up. And what are the habits? So triggers can lead to habits. Habits are an unconscious, repetitive action. Name some habits. Shout them out. Smoking. Also an addiction. It's nicotine addiction, but it's a habit. People have a habit of getting out of bed and lighting up, or after dinner, or whatever. Other habits.
Going on your phone.
What?
Going on your cell phone a lot.
Being on your cell phone a lot, yes. Other habits.
Nail biting.
Nail biting, yes. Fidgeting. Other habits. Speeding. Other habits. So habits are those things. The difference between a habit and practice. So some people will say, well, I have a habit of going for a walk in the morning, or I have a habit of always going through my emails before I get to the report that I have to write, or that's a practice. If it's unconscious, if you're not aware of it, it's a habit. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about how a deeper level of habit that might be part of your triggers. When I was the executive director of the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, I was coming in as a survivor of gender-based violence. I'm going to do some really good work in my community. What I didn't realize for a long time is that I was carrying my survivor habits into the work with me. And that showed up two primary ways. One, I wouldn't let go of something because I figured if I just try hard enough, I can fix it. If you know anything about domestic violence, interpersonal violence, I can fix it. I can help him or her. I can fix it. So I took that habit into my leadership role. I wouldn't give up that program because I know I can raise the money to replace the lost grant. And I ended up, losing a huge amount of money for the organization. The other habit that I recognized was that anytime, particularly men, but anytime someone got in my face, my back went up and I bristled and I went into attack mode. My fight response was triggered. Not particularly helpful if it's public housing. The Public Housing Authority, what? Right? So those were habits. And once I became aware of them, I was able to do something about them. So you don't just turn the light switch and a habit is gone. You have to shave it away. And how do you recognize your habits? You pay attention to your body. You pay attention to how you're responding. The only reason I knew that I was having the habitual response to a power dynamic was one man in a certain situation got in my face, did this, and I went home and I thought, I'm going to quit, or I couldn't eat. I wasn't sleeping. My stomach was in knots. I was breathing up here. I wasn't thinking. And I went, oh my goodness, I'm having a limbic system response. My fight-flight mechanisms are fully engaged right now. My cortisol levels are up. And it's because I have a habit of responding to that. I give that person too much power. I don't have to do that anymore. He's not going to beat me. Oh my God. I mean, I just went, I went into the meeting, I called a meeting with him. I said, we got to sort this out. And we did. So paying attention to your physical response can help you begin to identify when habits are showing up. Organizations have habits and movements have habits. Organizational habits. Okay, and I'm sure you can name others, but here's a few examples. Some organizational habits are very helpful and nurturing and very useful. Some are not. When we started looking at organizational habits at the Resource Center, when we did a retreat, and we were in a large group, and we were naming organizational habits, and somebody said, ignoring copier distress. And I said, what? What? Well, we had a big hall copier at the agency that was commonly used for lots of things, and every time that copier would start beeping and yelling, help me, I'm stuck, I'm jammed, every one of us would walk by that thing and go, somebody needs to fix that. Every one of us. I was part of the problem too. Somebody needs to fix that. Right? Organizational habit. So think about how your organization has habits. And remember, organizations are made up of individuals. Individuals are coming into the work with their own stuff. So if you've got an organization full of wounded individuals who are reacting to triggers all the time, you have an organization that's in some distress. You have a reactive organization. So it requires leadership to be engaged, but there are lots of things you can start to do to unpack that. But it also is about the individuals within your organization and how individuals, if managers are freaking out every time somebody challenges their authority, is that their amygdala? Is that a fight-flight response? Are they stressed out? How do we help those folks begin to develop more thoughtful, disciplined responses, not reactions? There's a difference between responding to something and reacting to something. So personal habits, trauma histories pull people towards what is familiar. There's an old saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, right? It's part of the reason why battered women don't leave. It's part of the reason why people who are in really abusive situations don't, I mean, you hear it all the time, why don't you just leave? Why don't they just leave? She didn't have to stay there. They don't have to stay there. It's familiar. We've developed coping mechanisms, survival skills that we know work. Whether they're unhealthy or not, they work. So it becomes habitual for us to react in certain ways. I got this thing. Oh, there's an expectation that you can manage any number of cases that you, oh, we got this new grant. Could you take the lead on that because it'll build your skills? And oh, yeah, I got it. Oh my God, no, I'm working 60-hour weeks. Defensiveness. People who are just going to argue with you if you ask them hard questions because they don't know the answer and they're afraid they're going to be found out. Those are personal habits. So I'm going to go through this quickly because I'm running out of time. But building resilience, there's 3 components to building resilience. It's the awareness that I've been talking about. It's balance. It's finding balance in your life. Work-life balance, very important. And it's connection. Connection with yourself and connection with others. I'll go briefly through these one by one. Awareness is really how do you begin to develop ways to notice your stress levels. It often can be giving yourself that time to just do a body scan or to just notice, where's my breath? But develop your own ways of noticing your stress levels. Are you smoking more? Are you drinking more coffee? Or is your sleep interrupted more often? Those are all indicators. Do you feel irritable all the time? Indicators of high stress levels. Know the body-mind connection. Keep in mind that there is no separation, right? It's just, we've been taught that you think your way through things, and this is part of the problem, that we have been educated to ignore our instincts. Education is great, and intellect is beautiful, and it's always good to have education and information, but not at the expense of listening to your gut. This is a very important tool, what's going on in your gut. Know what works for you. Be aware of the beliefs that keep you from self-care. I don't deserve to be cared for. If I don't care for others first, then they won't love me. You know, what are the beliefs that keep us from actually, and particularly women, we're taught that if you don't care for others at all costs, that you're not a good woman. But parents in the room, you know, if you don't care for yourself, your children are not getting your best. You know this as an employee too, working with people who are in distress. If you're not your best, you're not giving your best. Balance. Know what gives you energy. What gives you joy? You know, be drawn towards that which gives you energy and gives you joy. Allow yourself that. Feel gratitude. Feel joy. Think about the small moments that you can give yourself. Is it a hot bath? You know, is it a dinner out with a friend? Can you go for a hike on a Saturday? I mean, whatever the thing is that, oh, I really love doing that. I haven't done it for a really long time. Do it. Do it as often as you can. If it gives you joy, it will help keep you balanced. Understand how to bring your body back into balance. Most of us will get into a place of agitation where we feel like I don't know how to get out. We get stuck there. And understanding some of these very simple practices about breath work, movement, gratitude, sitting with forgiveness, whatever it is, prayer, listening to music. Music is a powerful tool. Connections. How are you connected with yourself? How are you connected with others? How do you stay real when you're connected? Now, I have a tendency when I'm stressed out to isolate. I know this about myself. I had a dear, dear friend die very unexpectedly just 10 days ago. And for the first few days, people were like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. Oh, wait. No, I'm not. I'm really sad. So how do you actually allow yourself to be in connection with people? It doesn't mean you're dumping on people, but there are appropriate ways of getting connected, right? So some practical tips around self-care, organizational and individual. Your organizational leaders are very important in this. They will model the shift of a social norm. If your organizational culture expects you to work really brutally long hours, expects you to pay for stuff, expects a lot of stuff out of you, see what you can do about changing that. Or talk to me and I'll have a word with your CEO. So organizational culture can be very, very helpful and nurturing, and it takes time. Organizational culture doesn't change over time, or it doesn't change overnight. It takes time. And individually, you have a lot more control here. You have a lot more control over your individual self-care. I suggest you start out by finding 15 minutes. If you can't do 15, start with 10. 10 minutes every day of spaciousness. Whatever that means to you. If it's 10 minutes in the morning is good. In my mornings, I now have a whole hour before I even start thinking about going to work. If it's 10 minutes in the middle of the day, if it's at the end of the day, if it's 2 minutes here and 2 minutes there and 2 minutes there, stand up from your desk periodically. Stand up and stretch. Breathe. Have your computer give you a little notification. I've been sitting too long. It's time for me to just take a moment and stretch and breathe. There's lots of different things you can start to do for yourself, but you're in the driver's seat here. Nobody's going to do this for you. It's really up to you. And it will happen over a period of time. There's a yoga practice called yin yoga, which I do not do, but I love the philosophy behind it, because what it does is it teaches you to stretch to the point before pain. Not to pain, to the point before pain. How do you know? Well, you only know because you're paying really close attention to what your body is telling you. So if you're stretching to the point before pain, and then you just hold and be still, if you know anything about stretching, if you stretch, then you actually have a little bit more capacity to stretch further afterwards. But if you think about this in terms of your individual or your organizational self-care, if you're not paying attention, you don't know where the stretch is going to start to hurt. It's like starting an exercise regime and going to the gym and just blowing it all out, and then the next 3 days you can't move. Well, I'm not doing that anymore. So make it work for you. Do it in increments. But start with 10 minutes every single day and try things. Try different things. If you try meditation and it's like, I'm not doing this right, okay, do some mountains and clouds, or go for a walk, or listen to music, or pet your dog or your cat. There's lots of beautiful things that happen with animals too. You can spend time with a loved one. There's lots of resources on our website. And I will say one more thing about that. So Catalyst, all of my seed grants are gone. We have ampersand families in the room. They got a seed grant. So the seed grants are gone, and I'm not sure what's going to happen with us next year. But I do have dollars in my budget for additional training. The training has to be around mind-body practices or cultural healing practices or resilience or self-care. We've got lots of people we work with, but there's people out there we don't know. So what I say is if your organization is interested in having a 2-hour introduction to mind-body medicine, or have Samba Fall come in with the Bantu healing drum, or Dr. Joy come in and do some radical self-care, or any number of other folks that we're working with, somebody should give me a call and we can talk about it. Because I do have some resources that I can devote to actually bringing some additional training into your organization. Questions? Look at that, 3 minutes before 1 o'clock. Questions? Thoughts? Reactions? Yes?
Hold on.
Microphone.
Hello? Is this thing even working?
It works.
It works.
Yeah.
It works? Okay. What would be like a recommended or appropriate approach to somebody who have PTSD and they fall into like a state of delusion, and for them it would be like hard for them to at that point differentiate between what's reality and what's causing their PTSD?
I'm not a clinician, and that's a question that really requires somebody who has clinical skills. So a therapeutic intervention might be absolutely right for that person. There's so many variables around that, and I don't know that I can answer it. There are things you can do to simply befriend and offer encouragement, but I think that is a question that a social worker or a licensed social worker or a therapeutic individual should answer. Yeah, sorry, out of my scope. But there's a guy that calls me every once in a while. He says, I know I need something. My brain chemicals are messed up, and every suggestion I give him, he says, that won't work, that won't work, that won't work. And I keep trying to find the thing that he won't go out of his house. And what do I do to help this guy? There's only so much you can do. At some point, it's like treatment. It's like chemical dependency treatment. Some people go 8 times before they finally go, oh yeah, I think I'm ready now. Some people get a little bit more each time. They get a little stronger each time. So any little touch point of care that you give people like that is really a benefit, I think. And I want to say something really quickly about the difference between compassion fatigue and empathy fatigue. Compassion fatigue is something that people talk a lot about. Compassion is simply kindness towards others. It is kindness, it's loving kindness, it's just feeling a sense of warmth towards others. Empathy is taking it on. If you're empathizing, you're absorbing the pain. You're taking it on. So compassion fatigue is a misnomer. I think it's empathy fatigue. If you're taking it on, you're going to get really fatigued. If you're offering compassion, you're actually producing happy hormones in your brain. You're actually benefiting from that. So there's a difference there. It's a slight difference. So. Okay, oh, any other questions? Questions? No? Stretching? Good. Look, she's stretching already. Look at that. All right. Yes? Question in the back?
What kind of suggestions would you have for someone who's like an empath? Like at the end of the day, I feel like I take on a lot of stress and like people who are grieving I deal with because I work at DAW as well and I work at Unda Young. So I deal with a lot of clients who have dealt with a lot of like traumatic experiences, but I feel like I'm taking that on and I don't know how to like let it go.
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I think the best thing you can do, there's 2 things I would say. One is be very vigorously intentional about your self-care. Because all that stuff about resilience, the awareness, balance, and connection, if you're not practicing it, you will burn out very quickly because you're just absorbing. So really be very intentional about carving out time for your self-care, knowing that that will help you be a better listener, a better comforter, better to help those people who need you. I would also suggest getting some, the elders at the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center. They're available to do mind-body training. Linda Eagle Speaker and Donna LaChapelle. Donna's not at the Resource Center anymore, but she's around. And Linda's at the Indian Women's Resource Center, and her job is to do mind-body healing. Okay. So I would call the Indian Women's Resource Center and see if maybe Linda could come and do some self-care, some mind-body work with your team. And if they need resources, have them call me. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.